Hi there, I'm Justina of Just Classical, and I am a lifelong musician with a degree in music therapy, and I have taught early childhood music classes for over 20 years. Plus, I have started the company Just Classical, where I provide music and art homeschool curriculum and courses for families. And today, I'd like to talk to you about simple ways to add music to your homeschool with a focus on listening activities. So first of all, why would you want to have your children learn how to listen? Well, of course, we want them to learn to listen so that they can follow instructions, right? And I'm going to talk about that a little bit and how music and learning to listen to music can help with learning to listen, to follow instructions and those kind of things. But I also want you to understand that listening is essential. In our highly visual world, where both adults and children spend hours focusing our eyes on televisions and computers, video games, and electronic devices, we distinctly overlook how important it is to listen. You see, listening is the cornerstone of development. A baby first orders its world through sound. Since the baby is unable to see in the womb, and since a baby's sight is unfocused at birth. Yet, a baby is able to hear and distinguish his or her mother's voice in the womb. Next, in order to communicate and develop language skills, a child must learn to listen. And to make sense out of the world around, it is important to learn to discriminate between meaningful sound and noise. Through listening, children also develop attention span, concentration, impulse control, and social skills such as learning to listen to others for effective communication, sensitivity, and compassion. Since music is sound, listening to music is an excellent way to develop listening skills. There are lots of things to listen to in music. Meter, which is the timing, right? Rhythm, pitch, the voices, the different voices of instruments, timbre, melody, harmony. Now, this kind of active listening, it's not just having the music on in the background as a noise, but this kind of active listening causes the brain to grow because listening forms neural pathways. Going to early childhood music classes or to elementary age music classes or taking lessons and including music appreciation throughout the school years is an important choice for developing listening skills. Also, music can be enjoyed at all ages and skill levels through listening. So how do we teach children to listen? This partly depends on your child's age and experience. Young children, like babies and toddlers and preschoolers, are in the prime time of developing their listening skills, but their attention spans are short. Older children may not have developed long attention spans for listening either, especially if they have spent a lot of time using visual technology. But you will want to approach learning to listen slightly differently with older children. So let's talk about teaching toddlers and preschool children how to listen first. So we're going to start with short recordings of sounds of the environment, like barnyard animals, like a cow mooing, a duck quacking, and pigs snorting, right? Those kind of sounds. So you can find those kind of sounds at a place called www.freesoundslibrary.com. And you can search for different kinds of sounds, but if you type in freesoundslibrary.com and then you do /animal-sounds, then you will be able to find those kind of barnyard sounds. So you're going to set up a focused listening time for listening to these sounds. You're going to teach your children to sit a certain way and prepare their ears to listen and their mouths to be quiet. Okay, so let me walk you through this. You choose 4 sounds from a particular genre. Then you're going to designate a special listening area. So you can listen using your phone, your iPad, your computer, a stereo, but don't let the children see the visual part, because sometimes the sounds come with a visual part, especially if you're using something like YouTube for your sounds or your pieces. What we want is our children to focus on listening not on looking. So you're going to set up your designated area. You can have the kids just sitting on the floor around a couch or around an area where you keep a stereo, whatever area, but it's a designated listening area. And they're going to come and they're going to sit. So they're going to sit on the floor by the listening area, or they're each going to have their own chair, like at the kitchen table. So your designated area could be the kitchen table even, but they should not be touching each other and they need to focus on the listening. All right, so you've got what you're going to listen to, you've got your designated area for listening, and now you're going to set up the listening time with the children. This is the third thing. So you're going to tell the children, we are going to have a listening time. Come over to the listening area. We're going to sit here on our bottoms with our legs crossed, crisscross applesauce. Or if they're sitting in chairs, we're going to sit in our own chair and not touch the other kids. When we listen, we are going to use our ears. Let's tug on our ears to get them ready to listen. Okay, so this is of course going to work with smaller children. Older kids are going to be like, what? Tug on your ears? But with little kids, let's tug on our ears to get them ready to listen. And when we listen, we are not going to make any noises ourselves. We are going to listen to sounds of a farmyard. So listen to the whole recording and then we can talk about what we heard. Are you ready to listen? Let's start by zipping our lips. So you're going to model taking your thumb and your index finger as if holding a zipper, and you're going to pretend to zip your lips. Then you keep one finger on your lips to indicate quiet throughout the whole recording. Okay, so you're going to explain to them, like I just did, how to sit, where to sit, how we're not going to touch anybody, how we're going to prepare our ears. Okay, we can emphasize this a couple times, pull on the ears, and we're going to zip our lips. And we're going to model it the whole time. And if a child starts talking, oh, it's a cow, then we're just going to remind them. Now, so I'll explain that again in a minute. So we've got what we're going to listen to, we've got the designated area, and we've explained to them how we're going to listen. So fourth, we're going to play a 10 to 30 second clip of the first sound. Now, when first starting to learn to listen, a child will probably be excited at hearing the sound and they'll yell out what he or she heard. It's a cow, right? I just said this. And that's okay, but you just remind them to listen only. And you can motion them to zip the lips again if you need to as well. When the recording is over, you're going to ask the children what they heard. And if you have more than one child, you might want to have them raise hands so they can tell what they heard. If you have one child, or if they're your own children and there's just two of them, they can probably yell it out. But if you want a little more organization, raising hands is a good idea. All right, so next you're going to have the children imitate the sound they heard. So moo like the cow. Then you can listen to the recording again and moo along. But we got them to listen first, right? And they're excited, so now they're going to moo along. Then you're going to tell the children that we're going to listen one last time without making the noise. So you may need to set it up again by pulling your ears to listen and zipping your lips. So then you listen to the recording again. Now you can move on to another sound, and you're going to repeat all the above steps with each new sound. So 4 sounds is a good place to start. Now this works especially well in the context of a music class or a music learning time at home, where you also sing and you move to short music pieces and you play rhythm instruments. So when you set up your listening time, it could just be a listening time, but it also could be just a little segment of a really fun time where you sing songs with your kids or you play along to a recording with sticks or something else, okay? All right, so teaching young elementary children how to listen is also, again, well, it's going to be a little different. So young elementary children will also probably respond well to short listening times of sounds of the environment, but they can also handle longer recordings of musical pieces that are 2 or 3 minutes long. And eventually they'll learn to listen to longer pieces. So starter pieces can be short excerpts of longer pieces, or they can be shorter works of different genres. So you can find a 2 or 3 minute classical piece, or children's piece or your favorite type of music. Just make sure you take into consideration if the lyrics are appropriate for children to hear, right? So there's lots of great short songs for folk songs as well. So young children will also get excited about different kinds of instruments. So learning about and listening to recordings of a variety of orchestral or band instruments will help them develop listening skills. Suggested recordings for learning instruments are narrated versions of Sergei Prokofiev's Peter and the Wolf and Benjamin Britten's A Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra and Camille Saint-Saëns' Carnival of the Animals. So these are specifically written for children, these pieces, and they introduce the instruments in a wonderful way. A Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra introduces all of the instruments in the orchestra. Sergei Prokofiev's Peter and the Wolf introduces some instruments, as well as A Carnival of Animals introduces some instruments, but they're all really great places for starting with kids where they can listen. And then you can get up and move to the Carnival of the Animals. That's a fun one to move to as well. I will link to an article of mine where you can check out some of my favorite resources for learning about instruments in the orchestra. Now, another way to improve listening habits in young children is to listen to stories, whether read aloud by an adult or an audiobook, especially stories of composers and their music, or stories with musical accompaniment. So there's a group called Maestro Classics, which has some of these, which are composers and their music, or poems and stories like Casey at the Bat. And then another group that has stories about composers with their music is called Classical Kids. So these will really engage young listeners. Now, to further develop focused listening, you can choose a classical composer each month and listen to the recordings each day from that composer so that you and your child know a repertoire of works from the composer. An especially effective way to enjoy the listening and become familiar with a piece is to repeat the same recording 5 days in a row. Repetition is how children learn, and the more familiar we are with a song, the more we enjoy it. Also, combine this with history as you read about the composers and the era they lived in. So here are some composers to study: Johann Sebastian Bach, Antonio Vivaldi, George Friedrich Handel, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, Franz Joseph Haydn, Ludwig van Beethoven, Johannes Brahms, Frédéric Chopin, Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky, Claude Debussy, Camille Saint-Saëns, Leonard Bernstein, Aaron Copland, Benjamin Britten. So you can find a list of these composers in my quick start guide to teaching about the orchestra. And these are just some great composers, great music to get started with. Now, as your children get used to listening to short songs and they develop their attention span, they'll be able to increase listening times for longer pieces as well. While learning to sit still and listen is important, children do not have to sit still every time they listen. They can also move to the music. Movement to music while listening can be a fun variation. This may include dancing freely, or with scarves, or doing structured movements like galloping, marching, spinning, rocking, and jumping. All right, so I've emphasized having a listening area and a listening time, but here's a few tips for listening to music with movement. The parent can lead children in a movement for a short section of music and then demonstrate and call out the new movement. If there's more than one person moving to the music, you might want to move around in an imaginary circle on the floor in one direction so that you can avoid having your children run into each other. And for slow music, try dancing with scarves, because this allows them to feel the slowness. With a scarf, you really have to move a little more slowly to let it flow, and it creates a kind of a beautiful experience with them watching the scarves as well. And it'll help them to slow down. Of course, you can move your scarf really fast, but It will help to dance with scarves if the music is slow. And for fast music, then again, you're going to want to try different movements. Walking, marching, walking from toe to heel, running, skipping, jumping, hopping on one foot, crawling, galloping, rock side to side or front to back. And this could be alone or with a partner. You can swing your arms side to side or up and down. You can make circles in the air with your arms and twist. Cross crawl, that's a really good one for actually working both sides of the brain too. That's where you touch your elbow to the opposite knee and you alternate sides. Another great movement is kicking your feet, as long as you remind them not to kick each other, right? So those are all great movements for listening to the music, but using the music as you listen to move your body. All right, so another way to participate while listening is to play to a steady beat. And that's using small percussion instruments, and that can be sticks, shakers, hand drums, clapping, or beating on the table or the floor if you don't have drums. And this works best to fast songs with a strong beat. So for longer listening times, you can have your child listen, and they wouldn't necessarily have to be in the designated listening area. They could be sitting at the table and they could be coloring or drawing or painting as they listen. And they might even want to use that coloring and painting to express what they hear in the music. All right, let's talk about teaching older children how to listen. So while you may not want to tug on your ears or zip your lips with older children, you can still set up focused listening times, starting with short pieces and gradually extending to longer pieces. Older children who are not familiar with instruments will also appreciate music more by learning about instruments. Depending on the age of the older children, stories with musical accompaniment may or may not still be appropriate, but focusing on a composer a month and incorporating composer study and listening to the composer's works into history study is still effective and appropriate for older children. Older children should have longer attention spans, hopefully, right? So it is also possible to listen to longer works, like a movement of a symphony or a full symphony. Now, depending on the composer, early classical composers, that's the classical era, that is, like Mozart and Haydn, they have tons of symphonies, but they're fairly short. I mean, they're like maybe 20 minutes for the whole thing, which maybe sounds really long, but you have to understand that Romantic era composers like Brahms and Tchaikovsky have 45-minute symphonies. And as Brahms said, a symphony is no joke. So it's something you want to work up to. But in a symphony, there's movements. It's usually 3 or 4 movements. And those movements, there's kind of a pause in between because it's a whole musical idea in one movement. And then they move on to something else and to another thing. They're all related in the symphony, but a movement is typically anywhere from 4 to 15 minutes. So it's a little shorter if you only want to listen to a movement instead of the whole symphony. So you can gauge that. Just listen to one movement every day for a week and then move on to the next movement the next week if you want children to be exposed to a great symphony. Now, you also want to have focused listening times where these children, your older children, can be involved in listening for certain elements in the music, and they can become familiar with the form of a piece. So movements have forms. It could be where they play a certain section, then there's a different section, and then there's another section after that that's the same as the first section. So we would call that ternary form because we have A section, B section, A section. Or there's rondo form, A section, B, A, C, A. There's also something called sonata form where we have the exposition, development, and recapitulation. So you don't have to know those forms, but I'm just saying there are forms that children can become familiar with as they listen. So there's questions you can ask before listening to a piece and to discuss after listening to the piece, such as what is the meter? So you're trying to get kids to focus on certain elements in the music here. So what's the meter? And meter is where you feel how you're counting it. So as you listen, you and your child can count along to see if it feels best to count in threes or fours. And this gives you a sense of the meter. So it's triple or duple. So you'll count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 for triple. If that's the feel of the music, then you know it's in triple. Or it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then for duple, it's either going to be 1, 2, 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you're going to feel this strong sense of beat every time you want to hit 1. So you'll know the difference between triple and duple. Also, you want to ask, what instruments do you hear? Is the song slow or fast? And there's certain musical terms that go with slow and fast. And so you might want to learn what some of those are. Slow terms are andante or largo, and fast is presto or vivace or allegro. Okay, so children can learn those terms that are usually Italian, and that's kind of fun when you think about whether the song's slow or fast. What are the words if the song has a choir or solo vocalist? Do you hear repeated parts? Are they repeated exactly the same, or are they a different set of instruments the second time you hear them? Or maybe they're a few notes higher, but a similar pattern. Does there appear to be a form? And what does the music make you think of? Like, does it make you think of a story or a setting or a feeling? So those are all things you can explore to lead your older children in listening to a piece. So learning to listen is a skill that needs to be developed. It is worth working through because learning to listen translates to growth in other skills like attention span, concentration, and effective communication. Listening can also help with emotional processing, and listening to music is something you can enjoy your whole life. So it's important for children to learn how to listen, and listening to music is an engaging way to learn how to listen. Now, I did want to address very quickly also that if you go to an orchestra or band concert, then you need to know certain rules about how to listen at a concert. So at an orchestra or band concert, the audience listens very quietly and they sit still because they are there to focus on the music. And so if you have plans to go to a concert, it is probably a good idea to learn how to listen at home. So at the concert, people are not talking to each other while listening to a piece, and they only clap or cheer at the end of the piece. They do not get up from their seats in the middle of the piece because they don't want to distract other people, and they're not there eating. And there is an intermission usually at a concert for the audience to stand up and use the bathroom and get a drink and move around. Once in a while, there's an announcer or a narrator, but it is a quiet event because why are you there? You're sitting there and you're listening and you're focusing on the music. And it is so great to go to a live concert and experience the music live. There's just something different about being at a live concert than being at home and listening or listening on the car radio, right? Now, I want you to understand that going to a concert is the opposite of going to a sports event. Because at a sports event, fans talk to each other, they cheer whenever they want to, there's lots of extra noise, and it's just part of the experience of a sporting event, right? The fans may stand up, they may leave their seats whenever they want to because they're going to go get food, because there's concessions, because those are a big part of sporting events. And the fans eat in their seats, and there may be a formal halftime, depending on the sport, but fans come and go as they please. And there's commentators and they're telling you what's happening in the game, and there's clips of music to get the fans excited and singing or dancing. So just understand that listening at a concert is very different than going to a sporting event. So just wanted to prepare you for that and set you up for that. All right, so thank you for joining me today. I hope this has been helpful to you. And if you want to dig a little deeper into music appreciation and how to listen, because a big part of music appreciation is listening to pieces, then I want you to check out my music appreciation course. It's called The Composer Detective. And you can buy the full course, or you can buy just one unit, or you can buy volumes where we have several units together. It's just a great place to start for you to get your child learning to listen and learning to appreciate music. So the best place to start with that is called Investigating the Orchestra. So I will link the course for you. A little interesting part of it is that I dress up like George Friedrich Handel to lead you through getting to know the instruments and eras of the orchestra and 9 great composers. So check out the Composer Detective or check out my membership where I also teach tin whistle, drawing, and about great artists. So thanks for listening. Now, I hope you'll go out and you'll enjoy listening to some music in your homeschool. I'm Justina of Just Classical. I look forward to seeing you again in my emails, in Facebook, or on YouTube. Have a great day.